Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Please consider subscribing and check out our Patreon. Let's have some fun. Story brought to you by ticklesbiggins. Carla Jean took another drag of her cigarette, savoring the sensations of the exhale for as long as she could. She'd been off cigs for a couple of years, up until she had that first fight with Mason. The moment he threw the first bottle and then the first slap, well, she'd been through a pack every few days for a while now. She glanced over to the woman in the driver's seat, Shannon. Carla Jean had known Shannon since they were best friends all the way back in first grade. Despite being a couple weeks younger than her, Shannon had always been something of an older sister for Carla Jean, a protector, a counselor, even a bodyguard when one of the cheerleaders in middle school decided that Carla had tried to steal her boyfriend. It had been a long, long time since those days, but Shannon never changed. The last few weeks had proven that. Carla Jean looked hard at the smiling face of Shannon. How lucky could she be to have a friend like this? A woman who had gone so far in the world, still coming back to a no-name town to fix the life of a friend who'd gone down such a different path. Carla Jean smiled sheepishly as Shannon glanced over. Are you sure he knows I'm coming? Oh, yeah. In fact, he might be a little enthusiastic when he sees you, Shannon said, almost giggling. Just lightly push him off you if he gets too huggy. You'll see he's not quite as intimidating as you remember. Shannon. Carla Jean paused to get a final smoke, then slowly ground the cig down into the ashtray. The thought of being anywhere near Mason's hands immediately put second thoughts in her mind. I don't know about this. I don't know if I can see him, not yet. Don't you worry about Mason, Jeannie. He's just dying to see you. Shannon laughed. Her use of her pet name for Carla Jean, a pet name as old as their relationship, brought a little hope into Carla Jean's pensive thoughts. Is this really going to work? I don't know about this, Shannon. The things you said, they sounded, well, I've just never heard of anything. Still keeping her eyes on the road, Shannon's laugh softened into a smile. She put a hand on Carla Jean's knee. Jeannie, trust me on this, honey. When you see him, you'll figure out I wasn't bullshitting you on this stuff. The stuff I told you last night, well, let's just say it was an understatement. That Mason you're thinking of is long gone, baby. And you've got some papers this new Mason wants to sign. Carla Jean looked down at the folder of legal documents in her lap. Okay, she said softly. They pulled into the motel parking lot around 9 p.m. Shannon didn't so much as glance at the office, instead pulling into a spot at the end of the building. It was clear she knew exactly where to go. Shannon, wait, Carla Jean said as Shannon moved to exit the car. I don't know, Jeannie, honey, I know, it's okay, trust me. Okay, you'll see. With that, they exited and began to walk up the metal stairs to the second-floor set of motel suites. Carla Jean followed behind Shannon, glancing nervously around her. This motel wasn't exactly a good place to stay. In fact, the only thing it was good for was a midnight parking lot purchase of something or other in Ziploc bags. Hell, she'd seen someone dumping syringes into a trash bin in the few seconds since they'd pulled into the parking lot. She wondered why Mason would have chosen to live here after getting that inheritance. Surely he could afford better. Carla Jean's thoughts were interrupted when Shannon suddenly came to a stop in front of a door bearing the number 431. Carla Jean noted to her surprise that the door also featured a taped-on print out of some tacky-looking art featuring a big stylized heart with flowers decorated with "Sweetheart, Go EXO." It looked trashy, even considering the rest of the environment. "This is it," Shannon said, her voice an almost mischievous giggle. It was clear that whatever was going to happen, Shannon was looking forward to it. Carla Jean felt herself tensing up out of habit as Shannon knocked once, twice, 3 times. The thought of Mason slamming open that door, his eyes burning with a rage she had seen so many times, made Carla Jean's knees tremble. The moment the door opened inwards, Carla Jean's eyes went as wide as saucers. The folder of documents fell from her hands like a ton of bricks. Shannon had been right. She hadn't told Carla Jean a tiny fraction of what had really happened to Mason. "Oh my God, Shannon, you look so darling, sweetie pie." The falsetto voice tore through Carla Jean's mind and only pushed her further into shock. The man who stood in the doorway was, to put it simply, fabulous. The first thing Carla Jean thought of was that RuPaul's show her kid sister was always watching. One of those drag queens who danced in heels so high they made Carla Jean wince. Somehow, this was even more flamboyant. The man was dressed in lingerie that was halfway between a 1950s pinup model outfit and the world's frilliest vintage bridal lingerie. It was outlandish. A long-line bra barely holding two oversized and obviously fake plastic breast forms, a girdle that forcefully created a wasp-shaped waist out of a distinctly male torso, panties that looked like they were mostly ruffles and ribbons, and stockings and garters that would be a little too much even for an old-school Playboy model, and everything covered in bows and frills and ruffles, like some kind of parody of women's clothing. That wasn't even covering the frilly matching high-heeled pumps that had to be 6 inches tall, at least, the heart-shaped purse, gaudy oversized pearl earrings, or the fake nails that extended a couple inches past the point of reason. But of course, the thing that really drew Carla Jean's attention and shock was the beaming face of the man who stood before her. A huge mass of platinum blonde hair, clearly a wig, a cheap one at that, was curled into an outrageous bouffant. An equally huge frilly pink headscarf decorated with fake roses and little ribbons tied off in an adorable little bow under the man's chin. And just up from that chin, the start of what was either a makeup disaster or masterpiece. It was the heaviest coating of makeup Carla Jean had ever seen, leaving the man's face with an unnatural matte look, almost like a living plastic doll, but only the kind of doll that got parents up in arms and got toy companies sued for indecency. It was so much makeup, in fact, that Carla Jean didn't immediately realize who she was looking at. It was until the tattoos on his arms and shoulder caught her eye that she gasped aloud, freezing mid-motion as she kneeled down to pick up the dropped folder. "Good to see you too, sweetie," Shannon grinned, sarcastically matching the flapping limp-wristed hand motion of the man in the doorway. "Aren't we fabulous today, Cupcake? Cute panties, very femme." "Oh, thank you, ma'am. I just loved the pretty little ruffled rear," Mason giggled, spinning expertly on his pink heels like an overexcited cartoon princess. Carla Jean gasped again, just now remembering to breathe. Shannon looked over her shoulder, smirking at her stunned friend. "Mason, don't you want to be polite and say hello to your darling wife?" "Carla Jean, oh my goodness," Mason gasped in his strained falsetto. He minced forward and dropped into a shockingly dainty curtsy despite wearing nothing so modest as a dress or skirt. "I know I have been such a horrible, bad, good-for-nothing husband. I am so... Before he could finish his apology, Mason burst into tears, sobbing uncontrollably, his constant falsetto pitch making an almost chipmunk-style sound as he bawled. Carla Jean snapped into reality when Shannon grabbed her hand and pulled her inside, even as she used her other hand to push the crying Mason into the motel room ahead of her. The cross-dressed man strutted with a scandalizing sachet of his hips even as he sobbed. The inside of the room was what Carla Jean expected, judging from the exterior, with the addition of very frilly and very gaudy decorations and clothing strewn about over every inch of open space. Shannon grabbed Mason's hand and spoke firmly. "Mason, dream pink lace broken porcelain. Clear state, pink doll stands pretty." It was almost like a spell. Mason immediately stopped sobbing like a switch had been flipped, now suddenly standing up straight in a girly pose. He was perfectly still, like some flamboyant mannequin, his eyes rolled slightly up like as if in a daze. Carla Jean was still shaking slightly as Shannon walked back to her and guided her to a chair at the room's small writing desk. "Oh, what?" Carla Jean whispered. "I told you, Jeannie. There's nothing a little hard work can't fix. Well, hard work and experimental, forced mental reconstruction techniques. When I told you there are things out there, things that are only known by people who have the ability to make whoever they want disappear to a black site at the snap of their fingers." Things that make Hollywood's idea of hypnosis look like a trick from a subpar talent show magician. Well, I wasn't kidding. I pulled a lot of strings for this, but as you can see, I think it was worth it.